Location: Geneva, Switzerland. World Unity Summit 2025. The air in the conference hall was tense. Cameras rolled silently. Global leaders, diplomats, and journalists filled every inch of the massive hall. The world was watching, but no one expected what was about to happen. At the center of the long mahogany table sat Captain Ibrahim Traoré, dressed in his signature tan uniform, firm, composed, and deeply focused. Across from him was Donald Trump, flanked by his entourage. His red tie was tight, his face flushed. The discussion was supposed to be about development in the global south. But then, Trump leaned forward, slammed his palm on the table, and shouted across the room, "Know your place!" The entire hall went silent. Journalists froze mid-type, heads turned, gasps filled the room. But Captain Traoré didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look away. He simply stared into Trump's eyes, calm, steady, powerful. That moment lasted forever. And for the first time in the summit's history, it wasn't power that filled the air. It was fear of what Traoré would say next. The world stopped breathing, and the cameras kept rolling. Traoré didn't say a word, but his eyes said everything. They held the pain of centuries, the pride of resistance, the unspoken fury of millions of ancestors buried beneath African soil. In that gaze there was no fear, only memory. Memory of what had been taken, burned, forgotten. Trump, perhaps expecting a fiery outburst, leaned back, smirking. But the smirk didn't last, because Traoré leaned forward slightly and whispered, just loud enough for the microphones to catch, "Do you know what place you speak of?" "I do. I've buried children there." The hall froze again. No one knew what he meant, not yet. But something ancient had awakened in his voice, something cold, heavy, real. Then he looked at the audience, directly into the camera. "Let me tell you a story. Not the one in your textbooks, the real one." And just like that, he began. He told of Ouagadougou, where children still dig for gold they'll never own. Of mothers walking miles for water that tastes like rust. Of fields that feed the West while their farmers starve. This wasn't a reply. It was a reckoning. His voice softened. Eyes dropped. And then he said, "There was a boy, Mamadou, 12 years old, bright, brave, born with dust in his lungs from a gold mine in Houndé. Mamadou never had a toy, never saw a beach. He worked before he could read, deep in the red earth, where American companies extracted millions. But Mamadou earned 38 cents a day. One day the mine collapsed. He screamed for his mother. She ran barefoot for hours. But by the time she arrived, all that remained was his shirt, tangled in rocks." Traoré's voice cracked. For a second he was no longer a president. He was a brother, a son, a man haunted by a boy's scream. "That's the place you told me to know," he whispered. "I know it better than you ever will." Across the room, Trump was silent now. So were the world leaders. No one moved. No one dared. Because Traoré had just painted a truth so vivid, it bled from the screen. And somewhere, in millions of living rooms around the world, people began to cry. This wasn't politics anymore. This was pain. The room remained still. No claps, no gasps, just silence. "Mamadou isn't alone," Traoré continued, voice low. "There are thousands like him. Boys whose hands bleed for your phones. Girls who carry babies before they carry books." He paused, letting it sink in. "They don't show you this on your news, because if you saw what I've seen, you would never sleep again." The screens across the summit flashed images, not charts, not graphs, but real footage. Tiny bodies curled on mining floors, tears mixing with dust, fathers carrying their dead on bicycles, hoping for a doctor who never comes. Some delegates looked away. Others wiped their eyes. But Traoré? He stared straight ahead, unblinking. You called it opportunity, investment, aid. But I call it what it is, a wound still bleeding. Then he looked at Trump. You told me to know my place, but let me ask you, do you know yours? A silence heavier than death filled the air. Because for the first time, people were no longer looking at Traoré like a president. They were looking at him like a mirror, and it hurt. Let me show you something else, Traoré said quietly. He held up a folded cloth, brown, dusty, frayed at the edges. This belonged to my grandfather. He wore it the day French soldiers tied him to a tree and beat him for refusing to give them his millet. The room stiffened. Some delegates sat straighter. Others stared at the cloth like it might speak. They said he was ungrateful, that he didn't appreciate the civilization they brought. All he wanted was his harvest. Traoré unfolded it gently, as if it were sacred. They never buried him. My father had to dig a grave with his bare hands at night, while the French flag still flew above the village. He looked up. These are not distant memories. They live in us, every day. Trump shifted in his seat. The American delegation sat frozen, and Traoré leaned in again. So when you shout, know your place, remember, that place is filled with bones, and names, and stories. He folded the cloth again, slower this time, and the world began to understand. This was not a speech. This was a burial. I don't stand here to insult you, Traoré said gently. I stand here for those who never got the chance to speak. Then, slowly, he began naming them. Sita, age 9, died from water poisoning in Gawa. Bakari, 15, shot during a protest for food. Amadou, my friend, killed by rebels funded by foreign money. Name after name, each one like a hammer on the soul. The camera caught a tear slipping down Traoré's cheek. He didn't wipe it. These aren't just statistics. These are children who dreamed of dancing, of building, of living. But they were born in a world where their suffering was profitable. Then he said something that made even the hardest hearts tremble. I do not hate you, but I will no longer beg you. He looked directly into the main camera, as if speaking to everyone at once. To every African child watching this, your pain is not invisible. Your voice matters, and your future will not be bought. Mothers cried at home. Fathers gripped the arms of their chairs, and young people across the continent whispered his name like a prayer. Traoré. The producers wanted to cut the feed. They whispered into earpieces. They panicked behind the scenes. But the cameras kept rolling. Why? Because the world was watching something rare. Truth spoken without fear. Captain Traoré took a sip of water. His hands were steady. His voice, calm like a father telling bedtime stories. Except these were stories of blood, theft, and silence. They said we were poor, but how can the house that feeds the world be starving? No one replied. Gold, cobalt, cocoa, oil. We gave the world everything. But when our children cried, you sent prayers, not justice. A ripple ran through the audience. Even some Western leaders looked ashamed. A Canadian delegate lowered her head. A German journalist took off his headphones and simply wept. Trump clenched his jaw. But Traoré wasn't finished. You ask why we turn to ourselves now, why we say no more bases, no more handouts, because dignity is not negotiable. A pause. And if that makes me dangerous, then so be it. Thunder outside. Rain fell like drums on the roof. It sounded like applause. You speak of aid, Traoré said, eyes still locked on Trump. But let's speak honestly, hon, it's not aid. It's interest. He walked slowly toward the podium now, voice rising ever so slightly. You give us money with one hand and take 10 times more with the other. You train our soldiers, then ask them to protect your pipelines. You build schools, then rewrite our history inside them. A flashback rolled on the screen behind him, footage of U.S. contractors laughing while African workers ate under plastic sheets. It was real. Undeniable. Our children grow up thinking Edison invented light, that slavery ended with kindness, that poverty is our fault. Then he raised his hand and pointed behind him at the video screen. But the truth is not afraid of light. And today, it stands right here. Trump opened his mouth to interrupt, but Traoré didn't flinch. "Don't speak," he said softly. "Just listen. For once in your life, just listen." And for the first time in decades, an American president went silent on an African stage. The room, still. The world, breathless. The moment, historic. The summit was now no longer a summit. It had become a courtroom, not of law, but of conscience. And Traoré? He wasn't just testifying. He was resurrecting something ancient. There was once a king in Mali who gave gold so freely, it shook the global market. There was a time when Timbuktu held libraries older than your nations. People leaned in. A quiet awe spread like wildfire. We were not born broken. We were broken open, exploited, carved, renamed, and then you told us to be grateful. He turned to the African leaders in the room. But what if we remember who we are? What if we stop begging? What if we rise, not with anger, but with purpose? Tears rolled down a Kenyan delegate's face. Traoré clenched his fist, not in rage, but in hope. Africa is not your burden. Africa is not your experiment. Africa is your equal. The audience sat in stunned reverence, and for one brief second, you could almost hear the footsteps of ancestors in the dust, nodding. We do not ask for permission anymore. "Do you know what hurts the most?" Traoré asked, voice trembling. "It's not the bombs. Not even the hunger. It's the waiting." He looked away, then back. This time not at Trump, but at the world. Across Burkina Faso, across Africa, mothers wait. For children who won't return from mines, for sons taken by militias, for daughters stolen by the night. The screen behind him flickered to real footage, a mother clutching a torn photo. A woman cooking for 5 but only feeding 3. A grandmother sitting in a doorway, eyes empty, lips whispering a name, again and again. You call us unstable, violent, but you fund the chaos and film our grief. He swallowed, voice thick. My own mother still sets an extra plate at dinner, for my brother who never came home. A sob escaped from a delegate in the second row. You ask why we're rising? Because we are tired of burying hope and calling it patience. His eyes scanned the crowd. Africa's mothers have cried long enough, and their tears now water the roots of something unstoppable. In homes across continents, people cried, not because they were weak, but because they finally understood. I wasn't supposed to be here, Traoré said quietly. I was born with sand in my shoes, not silver on my spoon. He smiled faintly, but there was pain behind it. I walked 6 kilometers to school each day. We shared one textbook between 4 boys. Sometimes I read by firelight. Sometimes I didn't eat at all. The hall listened in stunned silence. No one moved. Even Trump had stopped shifting. My mother sold tomatoes. My father fixed shoes. We didn't have much, but we had pride. And that pride told me, son, don't let them make you small. He paused, letting the words breathe. So I rose, not through money, not through deals, through duty. The screen showed young Traoré in uniform, in the mud, during a flood rescue, pulling children from a sinking schoolhouse. I didn't take power to rule. I took it to protect. He looked up again. And now that I have this microphone, I will not use it to whisper. A deep silence followed, because in that moment, everyone knew. They weren't watching a politician. They were witnessing a servant with a spine made of fire. Trump tried to laugh. A weak chuckle. He leaned into the mic. Nice speech, but words don't build economies. The smirk was familiar, the kind seen in boardrooms, in deals made behind closed doors. But Traoré turned slowly, walked toward him. "You're right," he said. "Words don't build economies." He stopped, inches from Trump. But neither do insults. The room froze. "You see, what you call leadership, we call memory loss. Because every loan you gave us, we repaid in gold, in silence, in sons sent to your wars." Trump tried to interject, but Traoré raised his hand. "No, today, you listen. We are not your mistake. We are not your aid project. We are the future you tried to postpone." For the first time, the smirk vanished from Trump's face. The collapse of that smile was louder than any applause. "And when history remembers today, it won't remember your shout," Traoré said. "It'll remember who stood up and who backed down." A single clap echoed in the room, then another, until the entire summit rose in a standing ovation. Not for wealth, not for power, but for truth wrapped in courage. Outside the summit, the streets had changed. As Traoré's words echoed across screens, crowds began to gather in cities from Dakar to Dar es Salaam. In Johannesburg, students lit candles. In Nairobi, bus drivers pulled over to listen on their radios. In Lagos, a market went silent, traders staring at mounted TVs. "This is not just about leaders. It's about you," Traoré said into the camera. "The youth, whose dreams have been insulted, whose future has been traded." He pointed toward the audience, but it felt like he was pointing through the screen. "You were told to be grateful for jobs that keep you poor. Told your countries are dangerous, dirty, dying. But look at your hands. They are strong. Look at your minds. They are brilliant." A brief silence. Then, "Rise. Not with violence, not with hate, but with unity." In the crowd, an African-American student watching from a college dorm in Atlanta wept. In Mali, a farmer's son turned to his father and whispered, "He's talking to me." Every syllable Traoré spoke was now more than a reply to Trump. It was a torch, lighting a fire in the hearts of millions. That night, Traoré sat alone in his hotel room, staring at the ceiling. He didn't check social media, didn't watch the news, he just sat, quiet, heavy. A call from Washington was expected. A private apology, maybe, but the phone didn't ring. Instead, his assistant knocked softly and entered, holding a tablet. "Sir, this just came in." On the screen was a video, a young girl in Tanzania reciting his speech to her classmates, in Swahili. The children clapped and hugged when she finished. Another clip followed. A boy in Haiti raising the Burkina Faso flag while shouting, "We are not small!" And another, a protest in Paris. African immigrants chanting his name. Traoré took the tablet, held it like it was glass. He didn't smile. He cried. "They heard me," he whispered. "Not presidents, not corporations. People." "Maybe that's enough," he said. He walked to the window, looked over the city, lights below, storm clouds above. "Tomorrow, they'll try to spin it, distract them, discredit me." But it was too late. The message had escaped the summit, and now it belonged to the world. Back in Ouagadougou, in the quiet early hours, a soldier entered Traoré's office and left a small envelope on his desk. No markings, just one word on the front: "Merci." Inside was a letter, handwritten, slightly smudged. "Dear Captain Traoré, my name is Aissata. I'm 13 years old. I used to think Africa was weak because that's what I saw on TV. But today, I watched you. And now I know. We are not weak. We are waking up. I don't want to be afraid anymore. I want to help. I want to study. I want to be brave like you. At the bottom, P.S. My mother cried when she saw you speak. She says thank you. Traoré didn't move for a long time. He reread it twice, then held the paper to his chest. Let them shout, he said under his breath. Let them mock. He lit a candle and placed the letter beside it. Because in that moment, he knew. This fight wasn't about politics anymore. It was about souls, and the world was watching, not just with eyes, but with tears. The next morning, something unimaginable happened. Not a press release, not a statement, but a wave. From South Africa to Senegal, murals of Traoré began appearing on school walls and over crumbling bridges, his face beside the words, "We will not kneel again." In Brazil, indigenous communities posted solidarity videos. In Vietnam, students wore T-shirts with his quote, "Dignity is not negotiable." Even in the U.S., something shifted. On the front page of the Washington Post, Africa answers back, a new voice emerges. Cable anchors stumbled to reframe the narrative. Some called him dangerous, others visionary. But none could deny what had happened. A single man with nothing but words and memory had shaken the world's most powerful leaders. He didn't shout, he didn't threaten. He simply remembered, said a British journalist live on air. And in doing so, he made us all remember what we chose to forget. People weren't just watching anymore. They were marching. They were writing. They were waking up. And it all started because Traoré chose silence over insult, calm over chaos, truth over tradition. When Traoré stepped off the plane in Ouagadougou, there were no red carpets. Instead, a sea of people, barefoot children, grandmothers with walking sticks, students in dusty uniforms, flooded the runway. No security could hold them back. No barrier could stop them. They didn't chant slogans. They sang lullabies, old ones, songs of freedom sung in the bush by rebels, by farmers, by mothers. Traoré didn't wave. He walked into the crowd, bent down, and hugged a crying mother. Then another. And another. One old man, blind in one eye, touched his face and whispered, "You said what we buried." He looked up and saw a boy, no older than Mamadou, holding a wooden sign that read, "Je connais ma place." I know my place. It's beside you. Traoré broke down. Right there, in front of the cameras, the crowd, the entire world, he cried like a child. Because in a world of walls and weapons, of microphones and lies, humanity had returned, not through force, through truth, spoken gently, but powerfully. 1 week later, Traoré sat at a small desk in a dusty schoolroom. He picked up a piece of chalk. On the board, he wrote, "Know your place." Then beneath it, in slow, careful letters, "Our place is in history, not forgotten. Our place is in the future, not borrowed. Our place is ours, and we're not giving it away." He turned to the children seated before him. Never let anyone tell you that you come from nothing. You come from kings, from rebels, from rivers deeper than memory. You come from soil that fed empires and souls that refused to break. He smiled. So the next time someone tells you to know your place, tell them you already do, and it's exactly where you stand. A camera clicked. The image of Traoré at the chalkboard went viral. But more than that, it became a symbol that in a world of cruelty and noise, dignity can still go viral. If this story moved you, if it made you cry, remember, or feel seen, then don't scroll away. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and comment below, "I know my place." Let's fill this comment section with a global roar, not of hate, not of division, but of awakening. Because the world doesn't change by speeches. It changes when you decide to listen and share. Now is the time. Let's rise together.